Dawn hung low over the hedgerows of Western Europe. A thin fog clung to churned fields where armored tracks had already carved deep scars into the earth. Inside an American tank destroyer, the air smelled of oil, metal, and burned propellant. 5 men sat in practiced silence. No one rushed. No one raised their voice. Through the periscope, a gunner watched a distant tree line. A German Panzer would appear there soon. Intelligence had said so. The crew had been under fire before. They knew the rhythm, spot, range, adjust, fire. Their commander spoke in a measured tone, as if calling routine drill commands on a quiet range back home, across the field. German tank crews would later describe something unusual that morning. Not superior firepower, not numbers, but composure. A calmness under fire that felt almost unnatural in the chaos of armored war. That calm had roots, and those roots began long before this fog-covered morning. By 1943, the U.S. Army had accepted a hard lesson from North Africa. German armored forces were experienced, coordinated, and deadly at range. Early clashes with Panzer III and for units had exposed weaknesses in American tactics and crew coordination. The response was not only better machines, but better psychology. American armored training in places like Fort Knox emphasized repetition under pressure. Crews drilled gunnery until range estimation became instinct. Commands were standardized. Each crew member had a narrow, defined role. Instructors sometimes added noise, smoke, and time pressure during exercises to simulate battlefield stress. The goal was simple: reduce panic by replacing it with procedure. Doctrine also shaped behavior. U.S. tank destroyer units, in particular, were taught to engage deliberately rather than impulsively. Ambush positions, fire discipline, and rapid relocation were emphasized over reckless charges. A gunner who fired too quickly could reveal position and doom the crew. Calm was not personality, it was survival. Meanwhile, German crews were formidable. Professionals. Many had years of combat experience by 1944. Their optics were excellent, their guns precise, and their tactical doctrine aggressive. They expected opponents to crack under sudden fire, because often that is what happened in armored warfare, but on several battlefields in Italy and later in France. They began encountering American crews who did not respond with visible panic. Shots came back measured and accurate. Movements were controlled. Radios remained orderly even when shells struck nearby. Those encounters hinted at a deeper shift in how the U.S. Army prepared its men for armored combat. A shift that became clearer as the war moved toward Western Europe's decisive campaigns. As Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Western Europe, American armored doctrine matured. Newer tanks like the M for Sherman were not invincible, but they were reliable, mechanically consistent, and supported by a vast logistics system. Crews often trusted their vehicles because they knew repairs, ammunition, and fuel would follow. That confidence mattered in combat psychology. Equally important was communication. U.S. tanks widely used radios in every vehicle, allowing platoons to coordinate fire and movement in real time. German units often had excellent command vehicles, but not always the same level of radio distribution across every tank in fast-moving engagements. The side that communicated clearly could appear calmer simply because fewer decisions were made. In isolation, American gunners also benefited from a production advantage. More live-fire training ammunition. Many crews had fired hundreds of practice rounds before ever seeing combat. Range estimation, target tracking, and lead correction were rehearsed again and again. When battle came, the motions felt familiar even if the danger was not. Weather and terrain added complexity. Hedgerows in France, mountain roads in Italy, and forested areas in the Ardennes limited visibility. Encounters were often sudden. The crew that reacted with a practiced routine were rather than emotion gained precious seconds. In armored warfare, seconds decided survival. German after-action accounts occasionally noted the steadiness of American return fire, not superior, not fearless, but controlled. That distinction mattered. It suggested a system working as designed, where training suppressed the natural urge to rush or freeze. And from that system emerged multiple perspectives on why this calm appeared under fire: human, tactical, and technological factors that shaped what both sides witnessed in battle. One angle was purely human. Inside an American tank, each man had a fixed role: commander scanning, gunner focusing on the sight, loader preparing the next round, driver holding position. Repetition built trust. When shells landed nearby, the crew often narrowed their world to a few practiced tasks. Calm was not bravery, it was concentration. Another angle was tactical doctrine. U.S. armored units emphasized teamwork between tanks, infantry, and artillery. A tank rarely fought alone by design. Crews knew that if they were engaged, supporting fire or nearby units might already be reacting. That expectation reduced panic. They were part of a system, not a lone machine on a battlefield. A third angle was perception from the enemy's side. German crews, trained aggressively and often operating powerful guns, sometimes expected opponents to break contact quickly. When American tanks instead returned measured fire, adjusted range, and stayed in position seconds longer than expected, it created an impression of unusual composure. In combat, perception easily becomes reputation. These angles only hint at the reality, because when battles intensified, when visibility dropped and distances closed, calmness was tested in ways training fields could never fully replicate. And that is where the true turning pressures began to show. Another angle was technological rhythm. American tank guns were stabilized better over time, and crews were drilled to fire, correct, and fire again in steady sequence. The gunner focused on the reticle, the loader on the next shell, the commander on situational awareness. This choreography reduced emotional spikes. Action replaced fear. There was also a logistical angle. Many American units benefited from reliable supply lines in later stages of the war. Ammunition availability and vehicle maintenance mattered psychologically. A crew that trusts its equipment thinks differently under fire than one worrying about the next breakdown or the last remaining round. Leadership formed another layer. Tank commanders were encouraged to report clearly and avoid unnecessary radio. Panic, short, Direct communication kept minds anchored to tasks. A calm voice over the intercom could steady an entire crew. Even while armor plates rang from impacts. Finally, there was the moral angle for many crews. The goal was not glory, but survival and protecting the men nearby. That mindset favored patience over recklessness. They fought to endure the day, not to create legends. Yet angles and theories fade when the battlefield compresses into seconds, when one decision, one shot, or one hesitation can decide who drives away and who burns where they stand. Those moments built toward a decisive turning point. The decisive moments often came without warning. A hedgerow parts, a tree line flashes. A silhouette appears where empty roads stood seconds before. Distance collapses. Training takes over. Inside an American tank, the commander calls a range. The gunner adjusts by instinct more than thought. The loader's hands move on memory alone. Steel casing, breech open, slide, lock. The driver holds a straight line despite the metallic scream of incoming fire glancing off armor. Across the field, German crews sometimes expected hurried shots or visible panic. Instead, they faced vehicles that halted briefly, aimed carefully, and fired with measured timing. Not faster, just steadier. One accurate round could disable a track. Another could force a crew to bail out. Encounters ended in minutes, sometimes seconds, leaving smoke columns as the only markers of violence. In those compressed instants, composure became a weapon as real as any cannon, and the outcome of several clashes began to tilt accordingly. Some clashes left written traces after action. Reports from 1944 to 45 describe engagements where American crews fired fewer rounds, yet achieved decisive results. The pattern appears repeatedly: short halts, controlled aim, coordinated fire between tanks covering each other's movement. In the chaos of armored warfare, shortened reaction time. A gunner who breathed steadily saw the sight picture sooner. A commander who spoke quietly reduced confusion inside the turret. Even a second gained could mean firing first. German accounts later noted the frustration of facing opponents who did not rush their shots. Armor thickness and gun power mattered, but psychology shaped the moment of decision. When one crew hesitated and the other did not, steel met certainty. Several encounters ended with German vehicles withdrawing behind cover. Rather than pressing an uncertain attack, the battlefield fell briefly silent except for engines idling and radios crackling with clipped confirmations. Those silences signaled more than survival. They marked a turning point whose consequences would soon become visible beyond the battlefield itself. By late 1944 and into 1945, the cumulative effect of these encounters became clearer. American armored units were not invincible, and losses were real, sometimes severe. Shermans burned, crews were wounded, vehicles were abandoned in mud and hedgerows. Yet operational reports showed a steady pattern: units that maintained fire discipline and crew coordination recovered faster and remained combat effective longer. Training doctrine played a quiet role. American crews drilled gunnery repeatedly, learning range estimation, target prioritization, and crew communication until it became reflex. Replacement crews were often rotated into experienced units, absorbing habits from veterans who had already survived engagements. Com was not personality alone. It was a practiced behavior reinforced by routine. On the German side, shortages of fuel, spare parts, and trained replacements increasingly limited tactical options. Even superior tanks could not influence a battle if they arrived late, withdrew early, or lacked coordinated support. Confidence shifted subtly. Encounters that once felt predictable grew uncertain. Post-war interviews and battlefield studies noted that psychological steadiness frequently shaped first contact outcomes. The side that identified, aimed, and fired with clarity often dictated the next minutes of the fight. Those minutes accumulated into momentum, and momentum, in war, eventually becomes history, raising a final question about what these moments meant beyond tactics and machines. The calm endurance of American gunners under German fire illustrates a truth often overlooked in wartime narratives. The human mind can be as decisive as steel and firepower. Discipline, training, and focus created a buffer against panic, allowing crews to operate with precision even as chaos raged around them. Their steadiness did not erase danger, nor did it guarantee victory, but it magnified the effectiveness of every shot, every maneuver, and every decision made in the heat of combat. For German tank crews, witnessing this composure was disorienting. They expected frantic, desperate resistance. Instead, they saw methodical, controlled responses. That recognition shaped perception and morale, sometimes more profoundly than physical losses. History remembers the battles, the movements of tanks and infantry, but equally significant are these fleeting moments when courage, training, and self-control intersect beyond the battlefield. These encounters suggest a larger lesson about warfare and human behavior. Machines and weapons follow physics. People respond to fear, stress, and uncertainty. The capacity to maintain composure under extreme conditions transforms potential chaos into coordinated action. In the end, these skirmishes between armored crews become a study not just of tanks or strategy, but of discipline, endurance, and the quiet human element that shapes history. Moments of calm under fire are more than survival. They are a testament to resilience in the face of destruction.